is just a few months after the end of tapering, if everything goes according to plan until then. So one, that seems a bit quick. Two, the Fed has been saying that they still think inflation is transitory, so I don't think they're going to be pushed into action much sooner than that. And third, we are going to be in a decelerating backdrop after this sort of post-pandemic, hopefully post-pandemic, big rebound. At some point in the second half of next year, growth is going to be slowing. So I'm not sure the Fed is going to want to be aggressively tightening when growth is slowing. So, end of next year seems like the earliest for me.
So then why are markets, challenging central banks? It's not just the Fed, it's also the RBA and the Bank of England, that there's this kind of deep division around how quickly central banks are going to act.
So we've seen a number of central banks start to normalize policy a little bit more. There are a lot of different circumstances in different countries and reasons behind that action. You've seen that there is a concern for markets about inflation, and there is a concern for markets about supply chains and how long they can last. And of course, the question of what is transitory or what does transitory mean is coming up even more because we're now basically 6 months into higher inflation. But when you look at the month-on-month rise of inflation in the U.S., it's actually back towards trend, 0.1, 0.2%. So if you wanted it to go back down a lot, then we have a sort of deflation question. So is it also a question of how long it lasts or the factors why we're seeing this higher inflation, as well as the fact that are we just going back to trend inflation, which does appear to be the case already?
In terms of earnings, what has earnings season so far shown you as we reach yet again another record high for US stocks amid all of this worry about slowing economic growth?
It's really proof that businesses can adapt, that there were worries about the Delta variant over the summer, but we do seem to be coming through a lot of that. Earnings in general have been better than expected, and we're getting some anecdotal evidence that the supply chain disruptions are going to start to improve, right? The number of ships waiting at the ports in LA, we've heard from Ford and GM that there's things were starting to improve. We had U.S. Steel come out quite optimistically on Friday. So again, if this situation does improve over the next 2 to 3 quarters, that's just going to be additional support for earnings, especially because we think growth was mostly delayed during the third quarter and not completely ended, and that should come back stronger as well.
Yeah, interesting. I also point to a note out this morning from JP Morgan strategists saying that the earnings season in Europe has been good so far and positive, but actually the beats are getting smaller and smaller. So, yeah, I think that's quite interesting. Look, about COP26, I wonder what your view is on the road to net zero. We've been speaking to a few guests about this morning, the pressure on business to deliver, even as national leaders face these enormous challenges. Francine Lacroix's on the ground there, and we've got all the leaders arriving this morning and then making comments. How do you think COP26 will change your investing? I mean, do you need a big deal for it to move the needle in terms of investments, or is business already on the road to net zero?
I think a deal would be positive and would be encouraging, but from a business perspective, the deal or no deal, we are seeing businesses move in that direction. Yes, climate is obviously a big priority for a lot of people. From an investor perspective, we've seen more and more demand for ESG, so it's not just the climate aspect, it is, the other letters as well, the social, the governance, and we saw that come up a lot during COVID, of course. So any agreement, anything that would have some synchronicity, if that's a word, between countries would be positive. We know that a couple of the bigger countries or the worst emitters aren't necessarily there as much, but there is going to be improvement. At the same time, government policymakers want to move in that direction, but a lot of these decisions and the timing of these decisions has also had an impact on all the different commodity prices and energy prices we're seeing at the moment.
Yeah, and that is a big pressure. I mean, fuel shortages at the pumps. And just earlier this autumn here in the UK. Esti, thanks so much for being with me. Esti Dwek is the CEO at Flowbank with her views on the markets in what is an important week for central banks, because over 3 days we'll get the RBA, the Fed and Bank making decisions, but not just those, there are others too. Coming up in the next hour, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, then Nathan Hager and Karen Moscow will be with you. So let me leave you with the data check then this hour. Your stocks 600 up by 0.6%. So we're on to a positive start for November after October was the best month since March for European stocks. FTSE 100 also up by 0.4%. One of the big stories though on the Bloomberg terminal this morning in terms of corporate news is Jeff Staley stepping down as Barclays CEO. Much more to come on Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg.
If knowledge is power, the Bloomberg Terminal is your power up, connecting you to the real-time financial news, data, and analytics that can take your workflow to the next level. Power up at Bloomberg.com/professional.
Supply chain performance or supply chain resilience? Why choose? With GEP, you can have both. GEP software helps hundreds of Fortune 500 and Global 2000 enterprises build sustainable supply chains that are agile, resilient, and deliver a distinct competitive advantage. That's great for your customers and great for your business. GEP, software, strategy, managed services.
NJIT makes innovation happen. It also makes entrepreneurs like Anya O'Dwyer, founder of Innovate, a tech-driven civil engineering and construction management firm. Anya says NJIT is defining the future.
NJIT is extremely important as a hub of disciplines all in one space with all of these brilliant minds. NJIT's role is huge when it comes to defining the future and kind of from a interdisciplinary point of view. They have it all there, whether it's the innovation hub, the maker's space. NJIT is already creating that collaboration between the disciplines, and you have civil engineers speaking to programmers, speaking to advancements that we've been able to do without those three minds coming together. One rather than solving the isolation.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Broadcasting 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Click. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios, this is Bloomberg Daybreak for Monday, November 1st, 2021. Coming up this hour.
President Biden's economic agenda appears on track for passage in Congress.
G20 leaders agree on a climate deal ahead of the COP26 summit.
Wall Street awaits a key Fed decision and the October jobs report.
And Jeff Staley steps down as the head of Barclays.
A New York City mandate means workers who are unvaccinated will be put on unpaid leave starting today. Plus, it was a nightmare of a weekend for air travelers. I'm Michael Barr. More ahead.
I'm John Stanshauer in sports. The Jets for the big upset of the Bengals. The Astros came back to beat the Braves and stay alive in the World Series.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak on Bloomberg 1130 New York, Bloomberg 99.1 Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Bloomberg 960 San Francisco, Sirius XM 119, and around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
And good Monday morning. I'm Karen Moscow.
And I'm Nathan Hager. Bloomberg Daybreak is brought to you by SEI. Challenges highlight one's character, partnership, and resilience. At SEI, they act as one community with their clients. Go to SEIC.com/banks.
All right, Nathan, thank you. And U.S. futures are higher to start the month. It is 5:01 on Wall Street, and we check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures up about 18 points this morning. Dow futures up 137. NASDAQ futures up 59, and the 10-year Treasury down 7/30 seconds, yield 1.57%. Nathan.
Well, Karen, thank you. Let's start in Washington this morning, where House Democrats worked through the weekend. They do still have differences, but it does appear that President Biden's $1.7 trillion economic agenda is on track for passage. Amy Morris has the latest from our Bloomberg 99.1 newsroom in Washington.
House Democratic leaders are pushing hard to get the package finalized, with votes on both that bill and a smaller infrastructure plan this week. The Senate, which has already approved the infrastructure bill, will likely vote on the larger package later in the month. Now, there are still some differences, but progress has been made on several of the outstanding issues, including drug pricing. But a Rules Committee meeting that was set for today would have prepared the bill for a floor vote tomorrow has been postponed. In Washington, I'm Amy Morris, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Amy, thank you. While we wait for a deal here at home, there's also a deal abroad. Leaders of the Group of 20 Nations have an agreement on climate, though it falls short of what some were hoping for. And President Biden is calling out China and Russia for not showing up in the fight against climate change. Bloomberg's Ed Baxter has the story.
Both did have representatives at G20 and COP26, but President Biden says Xi and Putin staying away from any kind of appearance is very disappointing.
Not only Russia, but China basically didn't show up in terms of any commitments to deal with climate change. And there's a reason why people should be disappointed in that. I found it disappointing myself.
Biden says China's especially reliance on coal is a huge obstacle. China's foreign ministers respond to the U.S. interference in its internal affairs regarding Taiwan has led to a breakdown in exchange. In San Francisco, I'm Ed Baxter, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Ed, thank you. That climate deal comes ahead of the COP26 summit in Glasgow this week. Negotiators hope to reach a breakthrough to fight warming. Bloomberg's Francine Lacroix is covering the meeting for us.
They want to talk about coal, cars, cash, and trees. You know, the G20 stopped short of talking about coal, but maybe we can get something on trees and cash, you know, certainly from the private sector. And then we know that diplomats and negotiators will work through tonight, as long as they have to for the next 2 weeks. So we could have, you know, countries coming out with a bit more pledge with that extra pressure from some of the emerging economies.
Bloomberg's Francine Lacroix says UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson wants to, quote, consign coal to history at the summit.
Meantime, Nathan, the U.S. and European Union have reached a deal on steel and aluminum tariffs. The agreement will remove levies on $10 billion of goods. They'll try to leverage it into a broader global arrangement that would penalize countries that do not meet low-carbon targets when producing the metals.
At the White House, Karen, word of a high-profile COVID diagnosis over the weekend. President Biden's top spokeswoman has tested positive. Let's get the latest live from Bloomberg's Renita Young. Good morning, Renita.
Good morning, Nathan. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki, who is vaccinated, revealed her diagnosis while President Biden was in Europe. She skipped the trip last week due to what she called a family emergency. Psaki said she last saw the president on Tuesday. They were outside more than 6 feet apart while both were wearing masks. A White House official says Biden most recently tested negative for COVID on Saturday. Psaki is among the highest profile figures in the Biden administration to test positive. Live in New York, I'm Renita Young, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Renita, thank you. Meanwhile, Moderna's vaccine for teens is still in limbo. It's been notified that the FDA requires additional time to assess the company's emergency request to approve its shot for 12 to 17-year-olds. Regulators are examining the risk of a rare heart inflammation.
Well, turning to the economy now, Karen, Janet Yellen is weighing in on rates. The Treasury Secretary is dismissing recent moves in the bond market. She tells Bloomberg News she's not worried about sharp movements in Treasury yields. Yellen thinks we're going to see a, quote, good, solid recovery.
Meantime, Nathan, it's a big week for economic data and monetary policy. We're gearing up for a key Fed decision and the monthly jobs report. We get more from Bloomberg's Michael McKee.
For the first time in a year and a half, the Fed is finally expected to change policy, announcing it's beginning to scale back its QE asset purchases. Markets anticipate a taper of $15 billion a month, which would mean QE ends in June. Then the question will be, when do they start looking to raise rates? That will depend on the progress of inflation, which in turn will depend on whether companies keep needing to offer higher wages to attract workers. Friday's October jobs report will offer the next clue, a third consecutive week number to indefinitely feed market fears. Mike McKee, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Mike, thanks. We got economic data out of China overnight. Data show the country's manufacturing industry weakened in October. More from Bloomberg Daybreak Asia anchor Brian Curtis.
China's official PMI dropped to 49.2 in October. It was the second straight month the index fell below 50. Manufacturers are struggling with power shortages and rising costs. Meantime, the non-manufacturing PMI also dropped well below estimates to 52.4. It was dragged lower by tighter rules on travel and social gatherings to contain the coronavirus. The private sector's Caixin PMI fared better, though, clocking in at 50.6. Brian Curtis, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Brian, thank you. And in Europe overnight, we got word of a change at the top of Barclays. CEO Jess Staley is stepping down after receiving UK regulators' preliminary conclusions from a probe into his ties to sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Barclays says, quote, the investigation makes no finding that Mr. Staley saw or was aware of Mr. Epstein's alleged crimes. Staley is exiting Barclays today. Straight ahead, your latest local headlines, plus a check of sports. This is Bloomberg.
At 5:07 on Wall Street, we're at 54 degrees in Central Park. And the southbound Bronx River Parkway is closed. There's an accident investigation at Boston Road. Michael Barr is here with more on what's going on in New York and around the world. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Nathan. It's Mandate Monday. New York City municipal workers who haven't received at least one dose of the vaccine will be put on unpaid leave starting today, raising the possibility of shortages of police, fire, and EMS workers. New York Mayor Bill de Blasio says more than 9 in 10 New York City municipal workers have received COVID-19 vaccinations. The police department reports that 84% of officers have been vaccinated, while the fire department reports 80% of employees are vaccinated. Flight delays and cancellations left thousands of travelers stranded over the weekend. American Airlines canceled more than 1,800 flights from Friday to Sunday, and Southwest canceled another 200 flights yesterday. Atmospheric Research Group transportation industry analyst Henry Hartsfeld says that severe weather at American's Dallas-Fort Worth hub caused cancellations that turned into staff shortages.
In part, that's because the airline is short on flight attendants. It's the end of the month. The flight attendants are out of hours, legally out the hours they can fly, and that's just left American in a really tough spot.
Industry analyst Henry Hartsfeld spoke to ABC. A new survey shows 54% now disapprove of President Biden's job performance, with only 42% approving. According to the NBC News poll, 7 out of 10 adults say the nation is heading in the wrong direction. President Biden was asked about his low approval rating.
The polls are going to go up and down and up and down. They were high early, then they got medium, then went back up, and now they're low. Well, look, this is look at every other president. The same thing has happened, but that's not why I ran.
Biden spoke at a press conference at the end of the G20 summit in Rome. Jury selection starts today for the young white man who prosecutors say shot to death 2 protesters and wounded another during violent protests over the police shooting of a black man in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Kyle Rittenhouse was 17 years old in August of 2020 when he traveled from Illinois to nearby Wisconsin. Prosecutors say he answered a local militia's call on Facebook for citizens to arm themselves and protect local businesses. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Nathan.
Thanks, Michael. Coming up to 5:10 on Wall Street, time for the Bloomberg Sports Update. Good morning, John Stansheimer.
Good morning, Nathan. They were ready to celebrate in Atlanta. The Braves led the World Series 3-1. They were 7-0 at home in the postseason, and they jumped in front of Houston with an Adam Duvall first-inning grand slam. Even after the Astros caught up, the Braves regained the lead on a long solo shot by Freddie Freeman. But the Astros with 3 runs in the 5th inning, 2-run pinch single by Marwin Gonzalez. They went on to win Game 5, 9-5. Atlanta now leads the World Series 3-2 with Game 6 tomorrow in Houston. The Jets were big underdogs. Why not? They had just lost by 41 in New England. Cincinnati was coming off a 24-point win at Baltimore, and the Jets quarterback was the relatively unknown Mike White, who until last week had never taken an NFL snap. All White did was go 37 of 45 for 405 yards, 3 touchdowns, even caught a pass for a 2-point conversion. The Jets down by 11 points with 5 minutes to go. Rallied past the Bengals 34-31, and White was asked about being confident.
I have an immense amount of faith in myself, and I think that I can go out there and execute the offense and move the offense, and today just was just an affirmation for it. But in my mind, I knew I was confident enough to be able to execute an offense.
White, the first Jet QB to throw for 400 yards since Vinny Testaverde in 2000. Dallas last night scored late to beat Minnesota 20-16. The Giants play in Kansas City tonight. The Chiefs struggling. They come in 3-4. The Rangers' first game in Seattle, a 3-1 win over the Kraken. That's the Blue Shirts' 5th straight road victory. Devils lost to Columbus 4-3 in a shootout. Easy win for the Nets in Brooklyn, 117-91 over Detroit. John Stashauer, Bloomberg Sports. Nathan.
All right, John, thanks. November looks like it's going to get started off with equity gains. S&P futures right now up 21 points. Dow futures up 170. NASDAQ futures higher by 71 points. The 10-year Treasury is down 8/32. Yield on the 10-year 1.58%. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
If knowledge is power, the Bloomberg Terminal is your power up, connecting you to real-time financial data, market-moving news, powerful analytics, and an influential network of financial decision makers around the world. Share ideas, negotiate trades, and gain the insight you need to make more informed decisions. See how the Terminal can take your workflow to the next level at Bloomberg.com/professional.
LP Accountants and Advisors presents Tax Chat with Lisa Goldman, partner and leader of Burden's International Tax and Advisory Practice.
If you're a high net worth individual with international investments or a business owner with operations overseas, it is essential to have a tax advisor who knows how to protect your assets on a global scale. Owning and investing in foreign corporations comes with certain tax responsibilities. Burden Accountants and Advisors works with clients to ensure that they understand the intricacies of the global market, maximize the tax opportunities available, and reduce the challenges presented by international tax laws.
If you're a high net worth individual or a business owner, let Burden help protect you, your family, and your business. For more Tax Chat from Burden Accountants and Advisors, visit BurdenLLP.com. That's BERDONLLP.com. Burden Accountants and Advisors. We listen, we solve, we do.
The Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council present the story of Tom and Levi.
Tom is the smartest man I know. He's been a professor at 2 major universities, been a teacher for over 40 years. One day, he told me that he was having problems in his classes. I think one of the students had asked the question and he didn't remember the answer. And I also noticed that he was letting his class out earlier than they were supposed to let out. And he was telling them that he was doing it as a favor to them, but I think in reality, he just wanted to get out of there. I was really starting to worry because I saw something was wrong.
Levi and I talked about how it would change our lives, but he was there beside me, and my love for him is just immense.
When something feels different, it could be Alzheimer's. Now is the time to talk. Visit alz.org/ourstories to learn more. A message from the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.
For the Jewish Communal Fund, past President Noel Spiegel.
People often ask me why it's important to use JCF for their charitable giving. I tell them that JCF has a profound impact on our community. Thanks to the revenue generated from our funds, JCF makes an annual $2 million grant to UJA Federation of New York and makes grants from our endowment, the Special Gifts Fund. This year, we proudly granted more than $800,000 to support a kosher food pantry at Mid-Island YJCC, Jewish daycare at the Ed Alliance, a renovation at Camp Oakhurst, and an intergenerational Holocaust program at Ramaz. I'd like you to hear about our impact from a past Special Gifts Fund recipient.
Plaza Jewish Community Chapel is most grateful to JCF for supplying seed to start the organization. Almost 10,000 families have relied on Plaza to provide an affordable yet dignified Jewish community.
Let JCF maximize your impact. Visit jcfny.org or call 212-752-8277.
When was the last time you felt fully informed on world and economic affairs? Is JDP catching up with the zeitgeist? Are we ready to catch up with the world? That might have been it.
Is that a move that's accompanied by better bank stock performance?
Tom Keene, Jonathan Farrow, and Lisa Abramowitz.
It strikes me the degree of policy uncertainty for economists to factor in.
Bloomberg Surveillance, weekday mornings at 7 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com.
Are you looking for ways to earn extra income? Interactive Brokers' Stock Yield Enhancement Program lets you earn extra income on fully paid shares of stock in your brokerage account. Here's how it works. We lend your shares to traders who pay us interest to borrow them, and you receive 50% of the income earned. It's that simple. Open an Interactive Brokers account today and start earning extra income. Find out more at ibkr.com/SYEP.
If
influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Anna Edwards.
Joining us now with analysis, Hugh Gimber, JP Morgan Asset Management Global Market Strategist. Hugh, very good to see you this Friday morning. So let's think about the technology space and what we've learned from the likes of Apple and the likes of Amazon about how difficult it is for everybody to get everything they need in the right places in order to make the most of what seems to be a robust demand environment.
It's confirmation that these supply chain issues are large and they're here to stay. If you take a step back and look at earnings seasons as a whole, I think generally the message on supply chains has been a little bit more positive than we'd expected going into this quarter's results. Because everyone was talking about pricing pressure, about the restrictions on activity that the supply chain pressures were creating. And we've had some slightly more encouraging news from the autos, for example. We've had some more positive news from other parts of the tech sector, like the semiconductors, who are still just seeing price increases really dominating any supply constraints. The news overnight is clearly not as positive as that, and so I think it talks to, first of all, the position in a supply chain being really important today, a very different outlook depending on where you sit within the tech sector, and also clearly some of the overnight moves show just how strongly priced tech names were going into earnings season as well.
Hear more conversations like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. European stocks rising to a record, and U.S. stock index futures are advancing amid earnings surprises and optimism the recovery in the world's largest economy is on track. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures up about 20 points. Dow futures up 150. NASDAQ futures up 70. The DAX in Germany's up 1%. 10-year Treasury down 8/30 seconds. Yield 1.58%. Yield on the 2-year 0.51%. NYMEX crude oil is up 0.3% or 25 cents at $83.83 a barrel. COMEX gold is little changed, up $1.40 at $17.85.30 an ounce. The euro 1.1569 against the dollar. British pound 1.3655, and the yen is at 114.26. And today we're watching for reports on construction spending as well as manufacturing. They're at 10 o'clock Wall Street time. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. President Biden joins experts and world leaders from nearly 200 countries for the United Nations Climate Change Conference in Glasgow. Those gathered for the next 2 weeks hope to come to a written agreement on how to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Countries will also review progress on the 2015 Paris Climate Accord. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki said she tested positive for COVID-19. Psaki, who has been vaccinated, says she last saw President Biden on Tuesday sitting outside and more than 6 feet apart wearing masks. In the World Series, the Astros avoid elimination, beating the Braves 9-5. It forces a Game 6 in Houston. In the NFL, the Jets, Patriots, and 49ers won. Washington lost. The Giants play tonight against Kansas City. In the NBA, the Nets won. In the NHL, the Rangers won. The Devils lost. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
Thanks, Michael. It's 5:19 on Wall Street, live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios. This is Bloomberg Daybreak, and as we get set for a new trading month, we're joined this morning by Lori Calvasina, head of U.S. Equity Strategy at RBC Capital Markets. Lori, well, if you've been long the equities in this market, you've been a winner, and it looks like we're poised for yet more gains. It seems like this equity market is just able to shake off every bit of bad news you throw at it.
Well, thanks for having me, as always. Look, I think the resilience of this market has been surprising to a lot of people. You know, if you think back the last couple months, there was a lot of talk of a growth scare, which we thought was premature. And frankly, you know, we are above our target now. We're around 4,600 on the S&P. Our target has been 4,500. So we don't rule out some additional volatility between now and the end of the year. But I think the market does, you know, frankly, deserve to be where it's at. I think as we've gone through reporting season, the one major takeaway we need to keep in mind is that underlying appetite or demand is still very, very healthy. Supply chains have created some problems in meeting that demand. But I think all that talk of a growth scare that we endured a month and a half ago or so, frankly, turned out to be premature, and equities have marched higher through it.
Are you thinking of adjusting your S&P target higher than 4,500?
Well, we think that, at this point in the year, we deserve, frankly, to be sort of judged on what our call was. So if we've been too conservative, we'll take our lumps for being too conservative. But we have been focusing people more on the year ahead call, where we've been 4,900 on the S&P for year-end 2022. And, it's funny, when we put that target out, we were sort of accused of being overly bullish. That's a sub-trend gain right now. So, it's just sort of interesting how the tables have turned. But we have been telling people to buy that dip. And if we get further volatility between now and the end of the year, we'll definitely be buyers on the dip as well.
What kind of volatility you're looking at once the Fed comes out with its decision later on this week? Of course, the market is expecting either a taper announcement or an actual beginning of taper this week.
So I actually don't view the taper as a big negative catalyst for markets in the short term. I've been joking with people. I think that we priced this into equities back in the second quarter. If you think back to kind of March, when the economics community thought that the Fed was behind on the inflation gains and was really pushing, sort of the argument that the Fed needed to remove accommodation earlier rather than later, we saw a lot of the trades that we would expect to happen during taper. We saw those happen back in the second quarter, where small cap began to underperform, value began to underperform. And so we think that the market has already digested this and it's going to be looking ahead.
So do you think that means that there's not much room left for that sort of reflation trade, the move from growth into cyclical stocks?
So I think that we've got room for what we call kind of one last hurrah in the cyclical value trade. If you look at value, small caps, they're still very cheap right now. They were held back by COVID for most of the year, and we think the outlook there is brighter going forward. Inflation is back in focus again. Both of those asset classes tend to benefit when inflation trends are rising. I mean, I do think we're headed into an above-trend economy next year. Consensus is still tracking around 4% in real terms. So I think we're going to see another big trade in those cyclical areas. But I think probably by mid-year, once Fed hikes start to come into view and 2023 comes into view, when GDP growth is already expected to slow back down to trend-line levels, that's when I think we're going to see the market flip back to large cap and growth. But I think we've got another, nice big trade ahead of us.
As far as the earnings picture goes, you mentioned a lot of the earnings surprises we've gotten in this cycle. Where are we set up for the rest of earnings going forward?
So I think we're in a really, sort of interesting moment. Last week and this week are the busiest of reporting season. And we've really, last week was really the first week that we got a fair amount of sector representation across most of the major sectors. I think what we have continued to see is that the beat rates have been very strong. Companies are still emphasizing the strong demand, as we noted earlier, even when they're having problems meeting it. And for the most part, most companies are managing through the supply chain pressures. Now, not all are, and those who are not able to execute are getting punished pretty mightily. But the market is being discriminating here. The market is not, beating up on the whole S&P 500 for the sins of a few.
In our last 30 seconds here, as far as earnings go, looking ahead, if those supply chain issues continue, can companies continue to work through that?
So I think the key thing here to monitor is investor expectations and whether or not they're met. Most investors, most sell-side analysts think supply chain problems will start to get better in the middle of next year based on the survey work that we've done. And so far, companies are really echoing that timeline in a lot of the comments where they're willing to make sort of a bet on the timeline. So I think the question is, does that play out, or do companies start to tell investors that's not the game plan? If it's the latter, then the market will have a problem.
All right, thanks, Lori. Good having you with us as always. Lori Calvasina, head of U.S. equity strategy at RBC Capital Markets, getting us set for November here as we look at gains in the futures markets. S&P futures up 19 points, Dow futures up 153, NASDAQ futures higher by 65 points. That's gains of 0.4% across the board.
If knowledge is power, the Bloomberg Terminal is your power up, connecting you to the real-time financial news, data, and analytics that can take your workflow to the next level. Power up at Bloomberg.com/professional.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Coca-Cola will pay more than $5.5 billion for full control of sports beverage body armor. The rival to Gatorade is on track for $1.4 billion in retail sales this year. According to the Wall Street Journal, the Coke deal values body armor at $8 billion. Professional athletes, including the NBA's James Harden and
and Major League Baseball's Mike Trout have invested in the drink, along with the estate of Kobe Bryant. Despite a growing number of people hitting the road or hopping on planes, the travel industry is still trying to bounce back from the pandemic. An analysis by Bloomberg finds that the drop in demand for nearly 2 years could mean some hotels, airlines, or other travel-related companies may be pondering restructuring or other financial-related moves. Strategists point out that while most carriers are optimistic, the sector is vulnerable to rising fuel prices, low levels of international travel, and uncertainty due to COVID-19 outbreaks. Wall Street's opening indicators are rising, with the Dow futures up by triple digits. Ann Cates, Bloomberg Radio.
What's the true value of your custodial relationship? Ben Harrison of BNY Mellon's Pershing explains.
As sophisticated investors demand more from their advisors, advisory firms, in turn, need to rely on their custodian to help them grow their complex businesses. At BNY Mellon's Pershing, supporting the rapid growth of RIAs is our #1 priority. We understand what it means to deliver true value to our clients who are looking for a custodian that is aligned with their best interest and delivers high-value solutions, all in an open architecture environment with flexibility, choice, and transparency. Learn why so many of the largest advisory firms turn to us for the financial strength, resiliency, and high-touch service that BNY Mellon Pershing provides. When you work with Pershing, we put your business first. Can your custodian say that?
Learn more at Pershing.com or call 800-445-4467. Pershing Advisor Solutions, LLC. Member FINRA SIPC.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their business strategically. Yet, the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating platform, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
I'm Steve Meyer, president of SEI's Investment Manager Services. At SEI, we understand the emerging forces that will define success for asset managers and what firms will need to compete tomorrow. That's why we continually optimize SEI's global operating platform. If your business requires greater agility, our advanced technology, integrated best-in-class systems, and multi-asset expertise can be your catalyst for business transformation.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
What I know about courage, I learned from my adoptive mom. She said sometimes you just gotta hold on and know we'll get through this. Mom, we are so high up. Hold my hand.
No, you hold my hand.
Here we go.
Learn about adopting a teen from foster care. You can't imagine the reward. Visit adoptuskids.org to find out more.
I learned patience from my adoptive dad. All he had to say was,
"Hey, you got this. Just breathe." Hey. Pretty good.
Yeah.
Might have to start a band. Learn about adopting a teen from foster care. You can't imagine the reward. Visit adoptuskids.org to find out more. This message is brought to you by Adopt US Kids, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and the Ad Council.
Introducing Bloomberg Quick Take. Our global stories take on tomorrow today. Watch live news on the events changing your business and your world. And go deeper with original shows on business, technology, politics, and culture. Don't settle for a news network built for yesterday. For a global view and an informed take, Bloomberg Quick Take. Now streaming free on Bloomberg.com/QuickTake. Brought to you by Accenture, American Express, and AT&T Business.
Economics, healthcare, policy. We could tell you more about the experts who join us on Bloomberg Surveillance. Do we have a Washington consensus?
There's been isolationism.
But wouldn't you rather hear them for yourself? Weekday mornings at 7 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 1061 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
Well, we're just about 4 hours away from the open of U.S. trading. Let's get you up to date on the news you need to know at this hour. Beginning in Washington, President Biden's economic agenda appears to be on track for passage by Congress, despite some remaining disagreements on the plan.
You've all believed it wouldn't happen from the very beginning, the moment I announced it, and you always seem amazed when it's alive again. Well, you may turn out to be right. Maybe it won't work, but I believe we'll see by the end of next week at home that it's passed.
President Biden made those comments at the G20 meeting in Rome. Leaders reached a climate deal at the summit, though it fell short of what some were pushing for. The deal comes ahead of the COP26 summit in Glasgow this week. Bloomberg's Francine Lacroix is there.
Here at COP26, we're expecting most of the G20 leaders, not China, not Brazil, and of course not India to show up. And then the focus is on these 200 countries to see whether they can reach a global agreement. And if the G20 can't do it, what can the rest of them do together? I think is the most worried and only question we need to ask ourselves.
Bloomberg's Francine Lacroix says UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson wants to, quote, consign coal to history at the summit, but there continue to be clashes over both objectives and timelines.
Meantime, at the White House, there's word of a high-profile COVID diagnosis. President Biden's top spokeswoman has tested positive for the disease. We get the latest live with Bloomberg's Renita Young. Good morning, Renita.
Good morning, Karen. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki, who is vaccinated, revealed her diagnosis while President Biden was in Europe. She skipped the trip last week due to what she called a family emergency. Psaki said she last saw the president on Tuesday. They were outside more than 6 feet apart while both wearing masks. A White House official says Biden most recently tested negative for COVID on Saturday. Live in New York, I'm Renita Young, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Renita, thanks. Back to Europe this morning, where there's a big change at the top of Barclays. CEO Jess Staley stepping down after receiving UK regulators' preliminary conclusions from a probe into his ties to sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Barclays says, quote, the investigation makes no findings that Mr. Staley saw or was aware of Mr. Epstein's alleged crimes. Staley exits Barclays today.
And U.S. futures are higher as we kick off a week that will feature a Fed policy decision and the October jobs report. Treasury yields are rising and Janet Yellen is weighing in. The Treasury Secretary says she is not worried by recent sharp moves in U.S. yields. In an interview with Bloomberg, Yellen said she thinks we're going to see a, quote, good, solid recovery. Futures are higher this morning. S&P futures up 19 points. And straight ahead, your latest local headlines, plus a check of sports. And this is Bloomberg.
It's 5:33 on Wall Street, 54 degrees in Central Park, and Long Island Railroad services suspended on the Babylon branch between Babylon and Jamaica. Peter Van will have details in a few minutes. First, Michael Barr with more on what's going on in New York and around the world. Michael.
Nathan, thank you, sir. Under a New York City mandate, those who have not received at least one dose of the vaccine will be put on unpaid leave starting today, raising the possibility of shortages of police, fire, and EMS workers. With the deadline for city employees to show proof of vaccination, some firefighters are protesting the mandate by taking sick leave rather than face unpaid leave starting today. The latest statement from the commissioner, Micro, says, in part, irresponsible, bogus sick leave by some of our members is creating danger for the workers and their fellow firefighters. It was another frustrating weekend for air travelers. American Airlines canceled more than 1,500 flights. The carrier blamed bad weather and staffing shortages that were first felt at its largest hub in Dallas-Fort Worth. Southwest canceled another 200 flights Sunday. Atmospheric Research Group transportation industry analyst Henry Hartfeld.
Problems in one hub means that flights in and out of that hub not only are delayed or canceled, but the crews who are flying in and out of that hub are also affected.
Industry analyst Henry Hartfeld spoke to ABC. It's the final day of early voting in Virginia in the gubernatorial race, and the candidates, Democrat Terry McAuliffe and Republican Glenn Youngkin, are both holding rallies for a final push. Youngkin spoke about critical race theory in school curriculum.
But what we will not do is our children to see everything through the lens of race. We won't. We won't pit them against each other and steal their dreams.
McAuliffe spoke about women's rights.
I believe that women should make their own decisions about their own bodies.
Voting takes place tomorrow in New York City as well for the city's mayoral race. Democrat Eric Adams still holds a solid lead in the polls against Republican Curtis Sliwa. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Nathan.
Thanks, Michael. 5:35 on Wall Street. Time for the Bloomberg Sports Update with John Stanshauer.
Thanks, Nathan. The World Series not over yet. The Astros came from behind, won Game 5 in Atlanta 9-5. The Braves seemed on their way after an Adam Duvall first-inning grand slam, but the Houston bullpen pitched 6 1/3 innings of scoreless relief. 3 hits for Carlos Correa and Yuli Gurriel. Marwin Gonzalez's 2-run pinch and single snapped the tie. Another chance tomorrow for the Braves, whose lead is now 3-2. The series is headed back to Houston. A star is born. The Jets quarterback was Mike White, 6th-round draft pick out of Western Kentucky, cut by Dallas, and then 3 times by the Jets, who never used him until Zach Wilson got hurt last week. His first NFL start, White led the Jets to a come-from-behind upset victory.
Receivers spread the field. Mike White in the shotgun. Takes the snap, rounds back, comes right, looks left, fires in the back of the end zone. Open his throw. He's got it. That's a Jet touchdown.
ESPN had to call third TD pass for White, who became the second QB since 1950 to pass for 400 yards in their first start. Jets upset Cincinnati 34-31. They did things they hadn't done all year, like score in the first quarter. They had their first interception. It was a big one. Jack Lawson late in the game. Just the Jets' second win, but they've come against good teams, the Bengals and Titans. Dallas, like the Jets, used an unknown quarterback in Cooper Rush in for the injured Dak Prescott. A TD pass in the final minute. Cowboys won their 6th in a row, 20-16 at Minnesota. The Giants play tonight in Kansas City. The Rangers won 3-1 at Seattle. Adam Fox, the go-ahead goal with 8 minutes left. The Nets beat Detroit 117-91. John Stanshauer, Bloomberg Sports. Nathan.
Thank you, John. It's 5:37 on Wall Street. Time for the Tri-State Business Report with Bloomberg's Ed Corey.
The Princeton Club of New York closed indefinitely on Friday. That's according to an email to members obtained by Bloomberg. The club's $40 million in mortgage debt is in default and being sold at auction. So far, no white knight has emerged to purchase the note and keep things running. Only 41% of the companies employing municipal bond analysts in New York set a mandatory date to return to the office. When they do, more than half expect to be in the office 3 days or more per week. Only 16% anticipate being in on Fridays, according to a survey. The New York State Common Retirement Fund will sell a $111 million holding in Ben & Jerry's owner Unilever over the ice cream maker's plan to halt sales in Israel's occupied territories. The Post says that State Comptroller Tom DiNapoli made the decision after Unilever violated his office's policies regarding activities related to Israel. At your Bloomberg Tri-State Business Report, I'm Ed Corey.
Thanks, Ed. 5:38 on Wall Street. Bloomberg Radio's on the air from San Francisco to New York, London to Hong Kong. Let's check in with our global news team for some of the top stories heard on our 300 affiliate radio stations around the world.
I'm Jeff Bellinger, and on Kogo in San Diego, I'm reporting that officials of the nation's West Coast ports are already stressing over next year's expiration of longshoremen's contracts.
I'm Courtney Donahoe on KRLD in Dallas. GameStop ousts its chief operating officer after 7 months in the job.
I'm Caroline Hetfield, Bloomberg DAB Digital Radio in London. We're reporting from Glasgow on day 1 of COP26 as the Prime Minister says the pledges by the G20 countries are drops in a rapidly warming ocean.
I'm Karen Chase, and for 1010 Wins in New York, I'll be reporting on the ramp-up in corporate earnings reports.
I'm Ed Corey on WTAM in Cleveland. I'm reporting a developer of business parks plans a big project in Portage County.
Those are some of the stories our 2,700 Bloomberg journalists and analysts are working on this morning around the world. It's 5:39 on Wall Street.
The following is an editorial from Bloomberg Opinion.
China's stepped-up nuclear ambitions have been hard to miss in recent months. Satellite images suggest the country has been building fields of new missile silos. The Pentagon predicts China's stockpile of operational warheads will more than double by 2030. In responding to this new reality, the U.S. should keep the threat in perspective. Even if China quadrupled its stockpile, it would still lag far behind the nearly 4,000 warheads in the U.S. arsenal. For now, China seems more concerned with ensuring that it can absorb a first strike and retaliate than with matching the U.S. bomb for bomb. That makes it essential to avoid overreaction. When Joe Biden meets Xi Jinping by video later this year, he should underscore the need to stabilize the U.S.-China relationship. Otherwise, the world could face a devastating new nuclear arms race. This editorial was written by the Bloomberg editorial board. For more opinion, please go to bloomberg.com/opinion or OPINGO on the Bloomberg terminal.
This has been Bloomberg Opinion.
You can hear Bloomberg Opinion editorials every weekday at this time. Terminal customers can read more at OPINGO. Futures moving higher on this first morning of November. This is Bloomberg.
The world's financial decision makers connect on the Bloomberg terminal. The buy side and the sell side together, collaborating across markets and countries in real time, sharing ideas, negotiating trades, and forming an influential network of over 325,000 financial professionals that helps power global markets. Isn't it time you join them? Request a demo at bloomberg.com/professional.
NJIT makes the workforce of the future. And Greg Sauter, a member of NJIT's Board of Overseers and president of engineering firm WGI, says NJIT graduates have the in-demand skills that drive today's tech-powered workplace.
Our world is moving to a place of connecting the physical with the digital. In the field of engineering and infrastructure, there's not a thing that we do that's not being changed by technology. We've gone from two-dimensional renderings to immersive, augmented, and virtual reality. Solution sets used to be solved one at a time. Now we can run nearly an endless alternatives analysis and optimize the output and how we construct that future, from autonomous equipment to 3D and 4D printing. NJIT students graduate with that critical understanding of the cyber-physical world and how we move between them, but with that all-important grounding in applied STEM principles.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Burden LLP Accountants and Advisors presents Tax Chat with Lisa Goldman, partner and leader of Burden's International Tax and Advisory Practice.
It's a smart business practice to diversify your investment portfolio, and many investors look for opportunities in different countries to achieve this objective. However, investing overseas can be complicated and often requires working with a specialist who has a firm grasp of both domestic and international tax law. At Burden Accountants and Advisors, our experienced team works with clients to help them develop cross-border tax plans that minimize their tax liabilities, ensure compliance, and save them money.
If you're a high net worth individual or a business owner, let Burden help protect you, your family, and your business. For more tax chat from Burden Accountants and Advisors, visit burdenllp.com. That's BERDONLLP.com. Burden Accountants and Advisors. We listen, we solve, we do.
This is your Bloomberg Real Estate Report. I'm Denise Pellegrini. Looks like the colder, the quicker is the big theme right now in the housing market. Redfin says instead of slowing down as the temperature drops this year, homes are selling even faster. The real estate data company says if you look at homes that went under contract in the last 4 weeks, a third sold within 7 days of hitting the market. And home sales look like they could continue to surprise. Redfin says home tours are up twice as much from January to now as they were pre-pandemic. San Francisco area seeing the biggest price gains in the last month or so, and we're back to that home selling for way over the listing price thing again in the Bay Area. $140,000 more than the asking on average. On the flip side, there's Atlantic City, where homes are staying on the market the longest. And if you're looking for a bargain, cheapest place on average to buy a home right now appears to be Youngstown, Ohio. Homes there selling for about $130,000. And that's your Bloomberg Real Estate Report. I'm Denise Pellegrini.
This is Daniel Blazer. I'm a trustee of the Jewish Communal Fund and chair of the Special Gifts Committee. Back in March, when the world came to a grinding halt with the coronavirus crisis, I turned to the Jewish Communal Fund to make grants to charities that were important to me. Our community of fund holders responded generously, and so did JCF. Through our Special Gifts Fund, which functions like an endowment, JCF made a grant of $1 million to UJA Federation of New York and the Metropolitan Council on Jewish Poverty to fight food insecurity and provide much-needed assistance to Holocaust survivors and single parents who have been impacted by the crisis. If you are not using a donor-advised fund for your giving, now is the time. Working with the Jewish Communal Fund is easy. It's convenient, it's efficient, and it enables you to focus on your charitable giving, especially in difficult moments like these. To find out how JCF can maximize your charitable impact and reduce your tax burden, visit jcfny.org.
BSO Now is your online home for brand new Boston Symphony Orchestra and Boston Pops performances. Discover new releases each week that include behind-the-scenes storytelling with conductors including music director Andres Nelsons, guest composers and musicians, plus critically acclaimed archival concerts and more. Visit bso.org/now, where the music plays on. BSO season sponsored by Bank of America.
Business, finance, and the latest news affecting world markets. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. This is Bloomberg Radio. Now, a global news update.
World leaders are gathering in Scotland today in an effort to save the planet. The UN Climate Summit is focused on how to cut greenhouse gas emissions and slow the Earth's warming. Negotiations will last for 2 weeks, but President Biden is only attending for 2 days. Energy Secretary Jennifer Granholm says the human infrastructure bill would take that pressure off of Americans.
$9,000 a year for child care. That's on average. This is going to eliminate that for people. I mean, that's just a huge boost to the bottom lines for people.
Speaking on NBC's Meet the Press, Granholm said the amount of investment between the bipartisan infrastructure bill and the social spending package has never been done in the country's history. She called this time an exciting one for the American people, adding that many lives will get better once lawmakers approve both packages. And a child is dead after falling off a hayride in Missouri. It happened Saturday night near Kansas City. Officials say the 7-year-old boy was clinging to a trailer when he fell and was struck by the trailer. I'm Mark Mayfield.
For some people, studying the markets is the best part of their day.
What have been the hits and the misses?
When we say some people, we mean these people.
Do they have similar pricing power?
Bloomberg Markets, weekday mornings at 10 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. This update brought to you by SEI. Crises emphasize character and partnership. One mission, one community. SEI. Go to SEIC.com/IMS. European stocks are rising to a record. U.S. stock index futures advancing amid earnings surprises and optimism that the recovery in the world's largest economy is on track. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures up 18 points. Dow futures up 152. NASDAQ futures up 56. The DAX in Germany is up about 0.9%. 10-year Treasury down 8/30 seconds. Yield 1.58%. The yield on the 2-year 0.51%. NYMEX crude oil is up 0.6% or 51 cents at $84.08 a barrel. COMEX gold up 0.2% or $3.20 at $17.87.10 an ounce. The euro 1.1569 against the dollar. British pound 1.3662 and the yen at 114.27. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael.
Thank you very much, Karen. More than 5 million people worldwide have died from COVID-19. Less than 2 years after the novel pathogen was first documented. The latest 1 million recorded deaths came slower than the previous 2 million. It took more than 110 days to go from 4 million deaths to 5 million, compared to less than 90 days each to reach the 3 and 4 million marks. President Joe Biden is swinging the focus of his battle for fast action against global warming from the U.S. Congress to the world. Biden will make his appeal to global leaders at a UN summit in Glasgow, Scotland today. In the World Series, the Astros avoid elimination, beating the Braves 9-5. Forces a Game 6 in Houston. In the NFL, the Jets, Patriots, and 49ers won. Washington lost. Giants play tonight against Kansas City. In the NBA, the Nets won. In the NHL, the Rangers won. The Devils lost. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Nathan.
Thank you, Michael. It's 5:49 on Wall Street, live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios. This is Bloomberg Daybreak. We want to get more now on the pandemic. As Michael mentioned, the world has now surpassed 5 million COVID deaths. and a member of President Biden's inner circle has tested positive. For more, we're joined by Professor Gigi Granvald, the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. Professor, it was Johns Hopkins that broke the news this morning, just about an hour ago, that we've reached that 5 million mark for global deaths. Although, as Michael mentioned, the rate of fatalities does appear to be slowing. What does that say about where we are in this global pandemic?
Well, it's a very grim milestone, and unfortunately, people should know that the total is probably much higher than that, and it will take some time to figure out. But it's never the case that we report too many deaths. The total will be much higher.
But in terms of the rate of deaths slowing, what does that say about where we are?
It's a good sign, but that we should keep doing what we're doing. The vaccination programs are doing well and better in some parts of the world, but there are still big parts that do not yet have enough vaccine. The ability to someday maybe be able to treat people with COVID in early days, that will help to slow this rate of mortality even further.
In terms of vaccinations, we just heard in recent days of another high-profile breakthrough infection from White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki. It's putting focus again on this issue of breakthrough infections. Why do these keep happening?
Well, this is the way that your body fights the virus. Being vaccinated will help you fight it faster. But Delta it replicates very quickly, and every day's different, and you're exposed to it differently. So all I can say, the bottom line is, if you can, get a booster shot. This is in the U.S. There's plenty, and it will help to prevent such things. We can't eliminate that, but it will help you be able to not come down with COVID.
So does it say something about waning effectiveness of the vaccines and further need for boosters, or does it say something about the effectiveness overall of these vaccines?
Yeah, I think we might have seen some of the vaccines that we think of as being 100% effective. We may have seen more breakthrough cases if we were back in time looking for them before a huge number of people were vaccinated. But right now, the vaccination definitely offers a lot of protection from serious illness, hospitalization, and death. But yeah, that's how your body fights off the virus. You get infected, and then your immune system gets to work. If you're vaccinated, that happens a lot faster.
A lot of people hear this advice about vaccines, and yet we continue to see large numbers of people resisting vaccines, not being willing to roll up their sleeves. We've got a vaccine mandate going into effect today in New York City. Tens of thousands of New York City workers are still poised to miss this deadline. How big a concern should this be, that we're seeing a lot of particularly public-facing workers not wanting to get the shots?
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that the vaccine mandates have been working really, really well. Yes, there are holdouts. I've spoken to many people who were resisting getting the vaccine, and they have lots of concerns, lots of misgivings that are fed to them that are not true, and so it takes time to go through all the things that they've been told that are false about the vaccines, and it's a lot of hard work. So I think, that has to be done. I feel very sorry for people who are going to lose their jobs because of misinformation that was given to them. But if you're public-facing and you don't take the vaccine, you're putting other people in danger. And so that is ultimately what needs to be addressed.
Thanks for this, Professor. Good having you on with us. Gigi Granvald with the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, which is supported by Michael Bloomberg, the founder and majority owner of Bloomberg Radio parent company, Bloomberg LP. Karen.
Nathan, it's 5:54 on Wall Street. Time for our Bloomberg Law Report, brought to you by American Arbitration Association. Business disputes are inevitable. Resolve faster with the American Arbitration Association, the global leader in alternative dispute resolution for over 90 years. More at adr.org. Let's get to the legal stories we're watching this morning from Bloomberg's Jeff Bellinger.
federal judge in Arizona ruled that Walmart will have to face an unjust enrichment claim for requiring employees to get screened for COVID-19 without being paid for their time. Republican state officials in Georgia will sue the Biden administration seeking to block the COVID-19 vaccine mandate for federal contractors. A federal judge in Texas ruled that for-profit businesses can be shielded from LGBT discrimination liability based on sincerely held religious beliefs.
Bloomberg Law. Everything you need, all on one legal research platform, including guidance, analysis, and Bloomberg Market Intelligence. Find out more at BloombergLaw.com.
All right, thanks, Jeff. Now another legal story we're watching. Citadel Securities is suing the SEC to thwart a new kind of market order from IEX Group. That's the stock exchange operator made famous by Flash Boys. The SEC approved the order type known as D-Limit, which has a roughly 350 microsecond delay to blunt the advantage of high-frequency traders. Now, the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals will decide whether to send D-Limit back to the SEC for reconsideration. For more on the case, Bloomberg's June Grasso speaks to securities law expert James Cox, a professor at Duke Law School.
Jim, explain the D-Limit or discretionary limit that was introduced by IEX.
This is part of their branding, which when they came on the stage initially, and Michael Lewis wrote about them big time, it was putting in a speed bump. You know, the individuals that are in the buy side of the market have been yelling for some time that they are being disadvantaged in not just the price discovery process, but disadvantaged in getting a good price by all kinds of mechanisms like co-location, et cetera. And what the exchanges did initially was install a speed bump to take away the edge that the algorithmic, electronic, co-located traders have been making a lot of money on.
Citadel Securities is suing over the SEC's approval of the D-Limit. What are they alleging?